What's up, Penn State fans? It's a brand new edition of BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. T. Frank, I am Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Penn State continues its march towards Marshall with its latest week of preseason camp. Of course, at this point in time, the Nittany Lions are getting closer to game prep and further away from the true dog days of preseason camp. But it's not over yet. T. Frank will hear from Matt Campbell tomorrow. We were out on the practice field as you guys recapped on Tuesday's BWI Live. And at this point in time, Penn State is at a point of camp where I think a lot of other teams across the country are, in that they felt like they've accomplished a lot up until this juncture, but they still have a long way to go until they feel fully prepared for their first game of the season.
Yeah, I struggle with this. I think there's a certain group of people who are never going to feel ready to go, from that perspective of we have all our ducks in a row, we're ready to go, we want to just like hit the ground running. Some coaches I don't think feel like that. And then some people, and I talked to some of them this week, are like, yeah, we want to go. Like everybody just wants to get this season started. And right. So this group definitely wants to get in to the regular season. And I got that vibe from Monday's practice. We talked a little bit about it, where you have a bit of a veteran rest day for a couple of guys, and then you're now working with some of the depth players. And once you get to that point of like, I don't want to say it's not serious work, because it's all serious work, but you got the sense they know what they have from the players that they need to know about. And then now we're into secondary things. And once you get there, it's like, okay, let's go. Like we're pretty much ready to go. And that's where I think Penn State currently is as we head into, what is this, the final week of true training camp, or is there one more week?
Yeah,
I forget how.
No, that sounds right. I believe that is correct. If let me pull up my calendar here. No, there's technically one more, but for all intents and purposes, this will be the last week and a half, so to speak, or at this point, really kind of the last week as we get into the middle of next week. They'll start to make that transition. But no, I think you make a good point. I think because of how new this Penn State roster is in terms of how many players joined it from elsewhere, it's easy to forget how veteran-laden this team is, especially on defense. You have a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball who have played just a ton of football. So, you have an 8th-year guy, for example. You have 5th-year guys, 6th-year guys, 7th-year guys. You have the most experienced quarterback in the country in Rocco Beck. You have a guy in Carson Hansen who's played a lot of football, Ben Bramer who's played a lot of football. So I can see what you're saying in terms of a lot of these guys are like you and me and are ready to see it in action, ready to hit somebody else, ready to see them, in our case, hit somebody else, and match their wits against someone that is not Taylor Mauser versus Dan Lynn, or so on and so forth in the one-on-one drills with the other position coaches. So we will continue to cover camp, though, and we will get into the nitty-gritty details about what we're seeing and hearing as Penn State continues working against just itself. But today we're going to get into the stock report, take a look at who's kind of moving up the depth chart or up the hypothetical ladder, who's moving down it through the first 2 weeks of camp. We're going to get into what we still want to learn. T. Frank and I have been able to learn quite a bit, as has the rest of our team over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, but there's still plenty left to learn. So we're going to talk about that, tell you about some of our sponsors who are kind enough to help us do the show, and we'll probably get into your questions as well. And I appreciate everyone already in the chat this morning. The chat has been active ever since preseason camp started, T. Frank. So we'll see if we have time to get to some of those as well. Let's start with this, though. Manske, the Penn State redshirt freshman quarterback, returned to the practice field this summer following a medical procedure that kept him off the practice field, had him out of state college, in fact, during the spring. The medical procedure, as Sean Fitz and some others on the Penn State beat wrote about yesterday over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and elsewhere, also happened to be pretty serious. And I think that if you look back on it and, for those of you listening or watching, we talked about it and just as it was described, which was a medical procedure. But, when you have an undisclosed medical procedure and you're not at camp or you're not on campus, T. Frank, I think it should be fairly obvious that it's probably fairly serious. This ended up being, as I close some tabs, so hopefully I stop buffering here. It ended up being a pretty serious deal for Alex Manske.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of describe the situation around Alex Manske and like how we've tried to cover it, because first and foremost, these are people. And when something like this happens, you want to take the person's humanity first. And I think that's how the staff felt about it as well. Clearly, that's how they felt about it. So, in our reporting, I know there was some vague language, and this is why, and so trying to respect his humanity while also keeping in mind football and health and all these things intertwine. And so I think that kind of explains pretty clearly how things were going this year. And then him opening up about this, on the eve of the season has been, I think, an emotional and powerful story for the team. Once we got closer to Manske being cleared, some of the people I talked to before camp were just elated, and they couldn't stop talking about how, fearless and how tough this guy is. And, with kind of the context around it being like, we're not going to talk about why, but like, this dude is so tough. This is crazy what this guy's been through. And then, Greg, for him to start camp as well as he did and to play as well as he has so far, coming off all of these emotional and physical things happening to him, it's unbelievably impressive. And it's something that, we didn't talk about in detail because it was kind of the right thing to do in these situations. And now that we can more fully throw it and say, like, Alex Manske is a miracle this year and is really impressive for what he's done so far.
Yeah, so I threw the link to the article in the chat if you're watching us on replay on YouTube. It ended up being that Alex Manske had a dilated aortic root and a dilated ascending aorta. Penn State found that out when they were doing some routine medical testing back in the winter when all these guys got back to campus, either the ones that were from Penn State's 2025 roster or the ones that got here. So obviously you don't have to be a doctor to know that sounds pretty serious, and it was. So Manske, as shown Fitz reports, ended up going to a special clinic where he had open heart surgery to deal with this. And you can read, again, the full details over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. But it essentially comes down to, he had to have open heart surgery to be able to fix this issue, to be able to play football again. And they told him as his progress continued that he was going to be okay to play. And they felt pretty confident that would be the case all along. But at the same time, T. Frank, as we can, I think, all attest, when you find out something like this, and Alex Manske talks about it in the story that Sean wrote that I linked on the YouTube comments, you have doubts and you wonder if everything they're telling you is going to end up being the case. And if you're going to return to the player that you were. And he stayed true to the process, and him and his doctors and the trainers and everyone at Penn State helped him get through it. And I think it's very safe to say that he is, you hate to get too far into the athletic weeds on a story like this, because the focus is just how incredible it was that he's now A, healthy, that they caught this and able to fix it.
Yeah.
And then B, that he's back with the team. But he has been, as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, really the talk of camp and his progress. We didn't see it in person until he got here. And then until, obviously, with no spring ball until summer camp. But he's been as impressive as a guy as anyone we've seen in terms of just his decision-making and the way he plays and the size he plays with and things like that. So he has been nothing but impressive. You can see why Iowa State wanted him when Matt Campbell was there. And you can certainly see why Penn State wanted him when Matt Campbell came to State College.
Yeah, Alan Saunders sums it up. Heart surgery is always scary. Yes, especially there is no form of heart surgery where it's like, a minor procedure. Even minor procedures are like, that's something going deal on inside it's a big deal. And there are certain, the humanity side aspect of this, like there is the football side of this as well, where we've seen this time and time again. Journey Brown comes to mind, of guys who have heart issues, then don't have a future in football. And so I know that that's a secondary part of this, but for a guy whose whole life has been football, it's like 1A, 1B, I imagine. And, all young players think they're going to go to the NFL, right? Like, let's talk about that. Like the future and the opportunity you've been working your whole life for, with life-changing money and all those complex emotions tied up in the scariness of a health situation. And so just the layers to this are pretty in-depth. And again, go read Fitz's article. I also put it in the link in the description. So if you're not here in the live chat, if you're watching on replay, you can. We got a bunch of links in the description, which we're going to get to here in a second. But make sure you check out that article. And of course, if you want to become a member of BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, there's the promo code or the QR code up in the corner of the screen, and that link is in the description as well. That'll help you get to all of our stories about Alex Manske and all the things that we've talked about him so far this year, because it's been just unbelievable. Which, we're gonna be talking about him more in a football sense later here in the show.
Yeah, it is. Definitely go check that out. Check us out over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. We're running a 75% off preseason camp special. So you can get in over there for $29.99 for the year. It's less than $3 a month. So if you're interested, check us out. Please do. From scrimmage intel, practice reports, what you hear here, we build on more in depth over there at bluewhiteillustrated.com. And we talk to you about it on the Lions Den message board, the premium place for Penn State fans to hang out on the internet as well. So be sure to do that. T. Frank, one other thought before we get into some other things here on Manske is just that and again, I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because we're both going to talk about him. We might as well just talk about him now, and then we can hit on him briefly in the stock report and move along. But his abilities and his health really changed the outlook of this quarterback room in 2026 and beyond. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it was a big, you talk about things we wanted to learn that we're going to talk about at the end. We still want to learn that we're going to talk about at the end of this show. Without Alex Manske being back and as active and as good looking as he has been so far throughout camp, I have no doubt that we would have quarterback play and backup quarterback play in that section. And it's now really kind of just an afterthought that Penn State is okay there in 2026. And not that they wouldn't have been with Connor Berry and so on, but you already moved one quarterback who was a freshman from quarterback to tight end. And coming out of spring practice, your other options were a transfer quarterback from a Division III school and another freshman, and including then we have walk-on Jack Lambert as well. So plenty of questions.
Just a quick reminder of where Penn State was in March. Connor Berry was the starting quarterback, and he didn't know the offense, and he had to go into the VR room and take thousands of reps so that they could practice, so they could actually get through practice. They were relying on the freshmen, one of whom, as you mentioned, is not currently a quarterback, and then their Division III transfer to get them through the first 8 practices of spring camp. Now they've got 2 healthy quarterbacks that they brought over from Iowa State, and it's a world of difference since then. It's just crazy the kind of storyline they've been through in that position this year.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. All right, T. Frank, before we get into stock up and stock down, let's talk some SeatGeek. Really good ticket place for Penn State fans, for sports fans of any sport. It is just a place where you can go and get all the tickets you're looking for, be it at Beaver Stadium or elsewhere. And it's one of my favorite ticket apps, T. Frank. My only ticket app, I should say. It's the only one I go to, whether it's Phillies games or whether it's recommending people who want to go to Penn State games. Always send them to SeatGeek.
Yep, and you can use the promo code BWI for 10% off your tickets at SeatGeek. If you're listening, it's in the description. If you're watching on replay, it's in the description. If you're watching here on YouTube, you can see it's on the banner. But appreciate SeatGeek. Make sure you go check them out because we're, 18 days away from the start of camp? Or for
17 from Marshall, yes.
From Marshall, thank you. 17 days from the start of the season. Let's get into the stock up, stock down report because I'm itching to talk about some of these football players.
All right, well, let's do it. Do we have any audio with this one? We don't. Okay.
No.
So let's talk football. Let's get into the things we have learned during preseason camp. And I think when you look at what we've learned across the first 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, whatever it's been of camp, is that number one, you have to remember that things change when the pads go on compared to when they weren't on. And you can learn stuff, as we've told you here on the show, and have talked about over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. But, you and I probably could have done a stock report in depth last week and it would have been fine. But I think with the pads now on and the chance to see that action and then learn about Saturday's scrimmage over at Beaver Stadium as well, I think it really informs the stock up, stock down opinions more so than when they were just in shells or when they were just in shorts, which is a part of camp, the early part of camp. But you certainly have, as does the coaching staff, more tape to work with. And then just more, Matt Campbell talks about all the time, T. Frank. He talks about building, what does he call it? Contact collision, and really talking about physicality
contact
and
equity.
Yes, contact equity. Yes. And whatever that might be, it's a heck of a buzzword, but whatever it might be, the point is you're not getting it before you put the pads on. And if you don't have it, you don't have the full picture of things.
Yeah. I like the imagery of it. Right. So I just love that, you get calluses on your hands from working outside, right? So it's calluses on your psyche, that pain is temporary, and smashing my body into this other person is not going to hurt as much as I think it is. Even though it will, even though it does. Right. I love the thing about contact equity. And I just started imagining that, so I totally forgot what was the thread we were picking up on? What did you ask me?
Yeah, just the idea that as you look over this stock up, stock down report for today, we could have done it last week without question, but I think you just have a fuller picture of where things are now that the pads are on.
I'm glad we didn't, because what we saw on Monday when they went thud last Monday, and then what we learned about the scrimmage really balanced out the picture between the offense and the defense. The offense, not a good day for them during that first thud period we got to see with the first time pads were on. And then full pads, it's interesting because I don't know the difference between going full pads and then what they were doing before, which was like contact with shells, where full on collision, you got the knee pads, the thigh pads, everything like that, was the Saturday scrimmage that we didn't get to see, but we did get to report on at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
Right.
Because I think we would have had a misrepresentation of the offense's progress when they were working through just a bunch of different line combinations, and then the defense was playing pretty strong. And so Saturday, that kind of equaled out. So let's get into it. Let's stock up here for some of these football players that we've seen over the first, what is it now? Like, who cares? The first 2 weeks of practice. You go first. I've got a list of guys, and I've got a bunch more in my head. So we'll just go until we run out of ones that are interesting, and then we'll move on to stock down.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So, let's just start with Manske, get that conversation out of the way, the on-field part of it, and just how he's looked. We talked about it, I think, probably enough to get the point across to those of you listening or watching here on the YouTube channel. But I think it is hard to put into exact words, T. Frank, for those who haven't saw it, just how natural he's looked at the quarterback position, how good of a passer he is, and decision maker. There's times when you watch him and you can, you just know it was a 4-star, so it shouldn't come off as some great surprise. But for a guy and he's a redshirt freshman, he's not a true freshman, even though based on how much time he's missed, he's kind of essentially a freshman at this point. Yeah. Speaking of that, can I clear one thing up in the chat quick? Because somebody said, sure, and it's on the line of the freshman thing. Number one, there's some people that really don't like the use of freshman, sophomore, redshirt freshman anymore. They want us to switch to first year, second year, third year. Happy to do that as soon as the roster on Penn State's website changes to that, because otherwise we're just going to confuse people. But someone had said Congress has to pass the 5-year rule first. That does nothing to do with Congress. The 5-year rule
totally different thing. That's a totally different thing. Yeah.
Yes, the 5-year rule was an NCAA eligibility thing. So that's already done. That has nothing to do with Congress. That is in effect starting for this school year. Did not affect the Penn State football program. Did affect the basketball program. Could impact the wrestling program. That's for a different podcast. Check that out later this week. I think the wrestling show is coming back here on the BWI YouTube channel this week. At any rate, that's not the point of this conversation. But Manske, like I said, is a guy that's missed some time. Matt Campbell's talked about that before. He missed some time at Iowa State as well for a very different injury reason, but an injury reason, health reason nonetheless. So he has not been, he's not gotten, T. Frank, all the developmental snaps you think a guy at this stage of his career would have had, and you can't tell. And that's why he's stuck up for me. It's
shocking how well he played. So for the timeline here, just so people understand, we wrote about this first week of camp after media day. I sat down with Jake Waters, the quarterback's coach, and kind of went through how all this worked. He was cleared in June and then kind of worked up to being fully cleared in July. So there was a ramp up for all of these guys. And that's something that we really have to hammer home. Summer practices are a bit more like NFL OTAs now, instead of just guys going out there with a football and hanging, like doing it all on their own. The coaches can be involved. Right. So getting a fast start to camp is one thing, but how he got a fast start to camp from a mental perspective, they've never really seen him do it. They didn't have him in spring practice his freshman year. They didn't have him in spring practice this past year, and they didn't have him for a full, they had him during the season, but you're not doing things in practice during the season that are really focused on development for young guys. So this is the first camp where they've really gotten to see him do it. And Jake Waters is like, I believe in the kid, but you got to, at some point you do have to see it. He knew he could do it. And then to come out and be as mentally sharp as he was, and to play with a level of conviction in his reads, the way that he looked like Rocco Beck, it's been great. He's been one of the better players on the football team this season. So it's not just that he went through an open heart surgery and had all of this adversity. He also came back and was one of the best players at a position where it's all about mental and physical combined out there on the football field on every single play, and he's looked great. So the rise has been meteoric. It's one of the reasons we haven't talked about Rocco Beck, who's also had a great camp. He's been totally overshadowed and having as good of, if not better, camp than Alec Manske. But because Manske was coming from just this wildly dark horse position, We haven't really been talking about Beck that much, and that's how good Manske has been. It's been legitimately earned during camp.
Can we change that? Let's change that right now because he was a guy I was going to put on my list and was rushing around this morning. I did not have as much prep time as I thought, so I did not get to put him on here. But let's talk about Rocco Beck for a second because the tape is what it is. You mentioned it on, I believe, yesterday's show, and we've talked about it before. Just the idea that we know what Rocco Beck is on tape, but to see him in person, I 100% agree with you. I was good. You took the words right out of my mouth. And that we've talked so much about Manske. I had somebody ask me the other day if I thought he was going to bypass Rocco Beck and become the starting quarterback for Penn State, and I said, well, of course not. Why would that be the case? And the person said, well, I just heard so much about Manske this preseason camp. And I said, you know what? That's on me for not talking about Rocco Beck enough because he's been just as impressive and looked just as good. He's not as, he's not put together the same way as Alex Manske, of course. But other than that, I think when you watch Rocco Beck command an offense, his decision-making is elite. And I think you'll see that. You guys talked about that some yesterday. But yeah, there's no Rocco Beck's being overshadowed doesn't mean he's not still having a great camp and is, of course, the starting quarterback of this Penn State football team.
You know, it's funny. I'm going to make a comparison that's probably stupid, and it's because they wear number 3, but Russell Wilson comes to mind with Rocco Beck. He's not tall, but he's thicker than you think. Like, he's not small. He's got a good arm, and he's got a really good deep ball. His accuracy, his decision-making is quick. It's decisive. There are some throws where he's inaccurate. Like, I would say, like, there have been some throws I'm like, oof, that's a little bit behind. But not many. Like, it hasn't been a huge problem in camp. And some of, like, what we're biased by the plays that are made, right? So the plays that are caught. Early in camp, Rocco was dropping some impressive dimes down the field to some receivers who then dropped the ball. You know, the ball's coming perfectly over their shoulder, out of the, zone where the DB can get hands on it, and hit the receiver in the hands and then fell to the ground. So if those plays are complete, we're talking about Rocco Beck in a very different way, as opposed to, almost. You have to, like, remember to give the quarterback credit in your mind for that incompletion because it was not his fault. So that's a big part of it, too, is, like, Manske's had some big plays in those 7-on-7 and competitive periods that we have seen and you log as more impressive, even though they were going throw for throw from an accuracy standpoint. So both of those guys are on the list. I'm going to go to the defensive line because I think this development is, a lot of these are going to be injury related when it comes to especially some stock down guys. But Siale Tapaki was a little bit limited in spring football, and now he's healthy. And oh boy, when you get to see Siale Tapaki, he's like 26, so there is that. Like he's
right.
He's in the same class as Sal Wormley, and that blows my mind because Sal Wormley was here forever. And because of the medical injuries and COVID and all those things, he's a class of 2019 guy, and it shows out there. He's physically impressive, and he's not like, you see these guys labeled as like 330, 325, and you think they're going to be like kind of sloppy. And then you see them standing there with their shirts rolled up a little bit, and they are not sloppy. Like, their defensive tackles, sure, their body type is big, but they are lean for their position, lean for their size, and he is just really impressive. There's been some plays that he's made. Matt Campbell mentioned him as a guy that's been strong during camp so far. I think, like, I've been trying to tell people that, just because they're not going to get pressure on the quarterback, which, by the way, Penn State's athletic defensive tackles never got pressure the same that you would think. So when you come to, like, dominant in the run game, I think Siale Tapaki can be that in the run game and has been really good when I've seen him play football. So he's one of my stock-up players that we haven't talked enough about.
I'm with you. He's a guy that when I put together my next group of players who caught my eye for one reason or another during camp, I did one already over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And when I do the second one, he will be on there. I mean, when you walk into practice, and again, to your point, he is 26. He's old enough to be in an NFL camp for a couple years now. So in theory, and he should look that way, right? I mean, if he's on a Division I roster at this point, he should look that way. However, it's one thing to think he should and to know that he should, and another thing to both see him look like that and see it then in action. So I'm with you on that.
He is 24. I was joking, but I didn't want to make it that I didn't want that to turn into a fact. I was just joking that he's like
fair enough.
Sean Clifford's
point being,
age.
Though, yes, I see. I know what you're getting at now. Yes,
yeah.
So at any rate, he could be in NFL camp for a couple years regardless. And the fact that he looks like he could is the main takeaway there. All right, let me go to a different one. T. Frank, I'm going to go on the offensive side of the ball, but I'm going to go to Trevor Burr, the Penn State guard. What's up?
I said love it. I love it.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah. Taylor Mauser spoke very highly of him, as did some of his teammates on earlier this week when we had a chance to talk to them after preseason practice. And he's a guy that is like the perfect offensive lineman. T. Frank. He's started multiple games at Iowa State. He was a guy that played well for them, and just you don't ever talk about him. It's just been a given and an afterthought and a foregone conclusion that, yep, Trevor Burr is going to come in. He's going to start at guard and everything's going to be fine. And for an interior offensive lineman, T. Frank, for everyone to just forget about you because you were doing your job, I think that is the high watermark of what these guys are looking for at that spot. And so far this camp, that's been the case.
Yeah, you mentioned, you nailed it. Like I haven't noticed him a whole lot. We haven't seen a lot of full contact stuff, so like the run game is an area where you're going to have those guys kind of stand out.
Right.
But the one time we got to see them didn't really go well, but part of the thing was the guys on the interior probably were not necessarily the problem. So him and Cooper Cousins mentioned in kind of the same breath by Taylor Mauser, but Trevor Burr, I think, is the guy that deserves to be in that spot. I'm going to go now to the backfield because we talked a lot about the offense and the quarterbacks in the backfield. I didn't want to stay there forever, but James Peoples. I think James Peoples is a guy that has probably made up the most perception ground in this conversation because just to reset, where we were at the start of camp from some of the feedback I got was Quentin Martin has been great this offseason. He was a standout during camp. In the spring, he was consistently a guy mentioned in the summer as who's having a great summer. And so, like, if you're just trying to mentally put these, starting blocks and who's ahead and who's behind, Quentin Martin, you heard more about him than James Peoples. Heard almost nothing about James Peoples. But through camp, he has been showing more and more of what he is. He's more well-rounded than I was expecting. He's a good receiver. We've seen he's not as good as Quentin Martin. There have been some mistakes he's made there, but he is also a viable receiver, which is something for a player of his size and ability, puts him in that kind of all-around category. And he's just like, you see him. He's 215 at 5'10". He's the same weight as Quentin Martin, and he's just been impressive through camp. So that running back competition, which at one point I was thinking was going to be either or, and I was thinking was going to be Quentin Martin, you can very much see where the roles are in the offense for both of these guys, and Peoples has been earning those tailback shares through camp.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think the tailbacks is just such a fascinating conversation because Carson Hansen's a little Rocco Beck-like, and then I think we've seen so many good things from Quentin Martin, and it kind of at times has overshadowed the fact that Carson Hansen will be RB1 for Penn State if he is healthy and ready to roll, which we expect that he will be. But you're going to see all three of those guys without question.
Yeah, for sure. And that has been kind of the thing of trying to remind Penn State fans of this isn't our opinion. This is the consensus. This is what we have learned is that Carson Hansen's running back 1. So as much as you want these other two guys to be running back 1 and 2, and you want Carson Hansen to be relegated to that's not going to happen. Part of what has also happened is that Carson Hansen, has been, veteran rest, dinged up a little bit. They know what they get from him. So they've been focusing on these two guys in this running back competition, and it has elevated their performance. It has put them in a position where they're both excelling, which is just such a huge win for this running back room. Again, going back to where it was during the offseason, and I was skeptical, James Peoples was beat out at Ohio State by Bo Jackson, a freshman, and was transferring to a new program in a new offense, an entirely new situation. Quentin Martin had to get bigger, and that had been a thing for him for 2 years, and he had not done it yet. Both of those things happened. And so, the ifs that I always say, if you're counting your ifs, suddenly you're in a position where this running back room, I think, should be a strength this year. Based on where we have seen things go, the talent is now getting up to the point where it's matching what it needed to be. Now we have to see him do it for real on the field, and that is that last knowledge gap that we have before, once the season actually starts.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. We're going to get the stock down in just a moment, but first, we're going to tell you about a couple of our sponsors helping make today's show possible. T. Frank, tell me about Cash App. I know you're a big fan. I'm a big fan. What should our listeners and viewers know about Cash App? Yeah,
so Cash App is this. What we're going to talk about here for Cash App is the fact that financial literacy is almost a lost art. It's kind of a secret out there, and one of the biggest things, when I was a kid, I just wanted to save up all my money to buy a video game system or a sound system. Like I wanted like big ticket items. I didn't understand how finances worked. I didn't understand how interest works. So for all the parents out there with teenagers, we know you're trying to keep a million different things under control, and money is just like, how do you even handle all that within the other things going on with kids and making sure they're safe? Cash App is here to help you make sure teens' money and their spending isn't adding to the craziness. It's never too early for kids to start saving and learn how to manage money. So small steps can build strong habits. Cash App, they can offer that to teens with interest on savings so they can grow their money faster and learn those good habits that are going to serve them well throughout their whole career, all under your guidance. So download the Cash App today, spend and sponsor your teen. So visit the link in the bio. We also have that here as a banner just to remind you, if you use the promo code FAMILY10, you'll earn $10 at sign up. So get a little boost there as well. Cash App is a financial service platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partners. Prepaid debit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. At Cash App, Visa debit flex cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC, and Bancorp Bank NA, pursuant to licenses from Visa USA Incorporated. See terms and conditions for Sutton prepaid card, Sutton debit flex card, and Bancorp debit flex cards. Savings provided by Cash App, Block Inc. brand. Visit Cash App, legal podcast for disclosures. Somebody put the actual URL in the read. Tell me about Polymarket so we can move on from that, please.
I like when you get to use your radio voice, T. Frank. They're throwing it back to the radio days. No, we appreciate Cash App. We also appreciate Polymarket. The Polymarket US app is where we are trading on Penn State. And right now, the win total market is really, I think, something that's interesting over at Polymarket, T. Frank. If you're watching on YouTube, folks, you can see how it works right on the screen. If you're listening on the podcast, we'll tell you a little bit about it as we go through it. But traders over there are watching how Penn State is going to, or trying to predict how Penn State is going to perform this year. And the win totals at one point during the offseason, Penn State was predicted to win less than 9 games. At this point, it's kind of flipping to being predicted to win 9 games or more. And I think, like we talked about last week, there's nothing we've seen through this point of the preseason, either regarding Penn State or otherwise, that would make you say that that's not realistic, T. Frank. And I think that that's really what's kind of been driven home here. If you're looking on the screen and seeing where the percentages are from the traders over at Polymarket US and in the Polymarket app. So check them out if you are interested in trading on the action. And T. Frank, I believe we have an overlay to get to here at some point. I got to find it. This is not my strong suit, but 18 plus for Polymarket only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Not available in all jurisdictions. Trading is risky. 100% loss can occur. See polymarket.com/TOS for more information. The Polymarket US app serves as an independent software provider and affiliate of Polymarket US and Polymarket Clearing, the CFT regulated exchange and clearing organization. So, T. Frank, let's get to some stock down. Don't forget about the code. I forgot about that. Throw that back up. Yeah. I apologize. The Polymarket app and Polymarket US, but don't forget the code over there.
This is the biggest thing. Yeah.
Right. Get 20
use promo code on 3.
Yes. So on 3 over on Polymarket US, Polymarket app, you can get $20 with the code on 3 when you go over there. So check them out today. Let's get to some stock down, guys, T. Frank. And every time you put this on the run, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted a quick shout out to a couple guys that we didn't get to, but I think that are important. Elijah Carnell is a huge development. He got a little bit banged up, but I don't think there's anything going on there. That's huge for Penn State's depth at defensive tackle and for their future. And then Keith Jones, I think, has done a good job. That has been something that Penn State needed to see some flashes from some guys that have that outside receiver opportunity, and he did some good things out there during the first half of camp. So I just want to give a shout out to those guys here quickly.
Yeah, no, good call on those guys. Keith Jones Jr. is so interesting to me. I don't know what role or if he's going to have a role in this offense, but when you see him do some good things, you can see why Penn State wanted him. And that's not, every time I say that, I feel like it comes off as doubting the Saps evaluation. That's not my intent, but couldn't tell you. You can go watch Grambling State highlights. I couldn't tell you how that was going to look.
There's a big projection.
On a big, I watched on a Big Ten. Yeah. On a big, exactly right. Yes. I couldn't tell you how that was going to go on a Big Ten practice field, but there's times you see him flash, T. Frank, and you think to yourself, yeah, this could work at this level. And it was a big jump. He knew that. The staff knew that. And what we're saying here is not guaranteeing he's going to have a massively huge role for this offense. Maybe he'll end up earning one by the time the season rolls around or midway through the season or what have you. But you can definitely see what they saw when they were evaluating him and saying, you know what, this is the guy we should go get.
Yeah, he's just a really interesting player from the evaluation standpoint because he is what they want from the size profile and from the vertical stretch kind of thing. But just looking at it, I'm just trying to quickly pull up how many snaps he had. 400 snaps last year. From a target perspective, it's not high. Like there's some things that you see that you like, but he did not have a ton of targets in that offense last year because of the way he was used kind of as a vertical stretch guy. So 53 total targets, just 33 receptions, less than 500 yards. And you like some of the things that you saw, but there was projections about, okay, is he actually a deep threat? Is he going to be fast enough? He's big enough. The catch radius, the jump balls, you can see how all of those things would come together. But it wasn't like a clean evaluation of like, oh, obviously Keith Jones is going to work at the next level. By the way, if he had, he would have been in huge demand in the transfer portal. So this is another example of their evaluation, them betting on guys that don't have a complete profile, that they think they can develop into a guy that has a complete profile at 6'4" with all that talent. So yeah, absolutely.
No
I
doubt.
agree with you in terms of like the surprise. And I didn't know what to expect from him because, again, another guy who missed spring. Just
Right.
another dude who wasn't out there.
Yeah, he was out there for, I think he got through like the first four practices and then got hurt in the fifth. Well, the first four was, as you can probably imagine, folks, with an all new everything, the first four practices were, I hate to use the word basic because that's inaccurate for a Division I FBS Big Ten program run by the kind of coaches that run it. But there was a lot of things they were doing that was not necessarily projectable to how a guy was going to fit in the offense in the 2026 season. So, Alan makes a good point here. That's our stock up guys. Now we're going to look at the stock down ones. And he makes a fair point. He says, is the segment really needed? I get it. So let's call it something else, Steve Frank. It's basically, simply put, I'm okay with it being stock down, but we're not trying to dump on anyone here or rag on anyone here. But the reality is, for some guys who do well in camp, it means other guys either are being passed on the depth chart or are not in the situation that we thought they were going to be in. And I think if you go back over the course of our preseason conversations, it's hard to not mention those guys. And I know it's maybe not enjoyable for some to listen to, but it's the reality of preseason camp coverage. And I think no one exemplifies that better than a guy that you and I both had on our list, which is center Dom Rowley, a guy that is obviously beloved within this program, and a guy that, Penn State, I think fans and Penn State coaches and everybody else were hoping would really push for this starting center job after not being healthy during the spring. And there's just been really no indication at this point, T. Frank, from your people that you've talked to, from ones I've talked to, there's just really been no indication that Brock Riker is going to be unseated by Dom Rowley, which is a shame because, again, I think that there's few more people, it seems, that are more beloved in this program than him, if anybody is. And it just is an unfortunate situation where it does not seem like he is pushing in the way that he hoped to, or maybe that Penn State hoped he would as well.
This is uncomfortable, right? I don't like doing this, like you said, but at a certain point, this is the reality of sports. And I've heard multiple times from people, it's not, people just want to know where they stand. They don't want to feel like they don't know. And so I'm hoping that this is reflective of things these guys have already heard. This is not us dumping on anybody. It's just trying to understand the lay of the land and address what has happened in camp. And Dom really had an opportunity early in camp where they were letting him cycle in with the first team quite a bit, and he got a lot of opportunities. And I think he does some things really well. But if you're comparing him to Riker, who has more strength in his frame per pound, than Rowley, even though they're kind of in the same ballpark, there's just been times that Dom has gotten kind of overwhelmed by some of the defensive tackles on the other side of the line of scrimmage that we've seen, and then got banged up. And so there has been a stratification where there was very clearly I don't know if it was a competition, but they were giving each guy some reps with the first team,
no doubt,
cycling in to see what they could do. And that has not happened recently for a number of reasons, but one of them being health. And that's going to be a lot of what we talk about here, is just guys that were banged up who missed opportunities and have created opportunities for other guys. So it maybe if you don't like the fact that we're saying it's stock down, just think of it as an injury report, because a lot of that does have to do with what's going on here in the stock down area.
Yeah, so let's talk about another guy that you have on your list here, Peyton Falzone. We talked about him a little bit earlier in the
Yeah.
show, but freshman Penn State 4-star signee, was a quarterback for the first five, or for spring practice, and then the first five preseason camps of his Penn State career. He's now moving to tight end, where we will see. Obviously, this is a very loaded Penn State tight ends room in 2026. Is there more opportunity at tight end down the road for him to get on the field than at quarterback? That's obviously something he and the staff are exploring at this point in time. But you got him here, T. Frank. I'm assuming it's just because the position switch happened so early in his career. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, you're not trying to dump on a guy whose career aspiration is to play quarterback. And, I have been on the side of give the kid a chance to see what he can do, see if he can make it work. Like we live in an era where guys change their throwing motions and become good at quarterback. And so the stock down to me is really the timing of everything, where there's two aspects to this. Really, this is a stock down for the tight end position as well, because they've had so many injuries. Kordovich and Cooper Alexander have not been out there for a good stretch of camp. And they've moved guys around. We saw Bobby Mears move over from defensive end so they could have some tight end bodies on the roster. Jake Lukac has been getting a lot of reps as a run-on, as an H-back type of player. And then they move Falzone to tight end so they have some more bodies at the position. It is not... again, the way Campbell phrased it was like doing what's best for the team and hopefully what's best for him long-term. Right. And so hopefully this is actually a stock up for him, that this all works out. But right now he's a 217-pound tight end who's been playing quarterback and has not been, digesting what it is to be a tight end, and now is going to be thrown into those blocking drills, thrown into those situations. I'm sure they're going to protect him from like some of the worst of it. They're not going to put him up against the first-team defensive ends because that's not going to do enough for the defensive ends either. But you just there's a lot of adversity coming his way from this position switch. And he can make the most of it, and we expect, the athleticism and all those things to make plays, but just to do a hard position switch like that in camp a week in, I don't know how to characterize it any other way and not be telling you lies or being, facetious or whatever the word might be to be lying about the situation. It is what it is. And so that's, I think Peyton Falzone, it's an honest conversation about that particular situation.
Yeah, when Matt Campbell said about doing it for the team, and when you see the numbers crunch that's going on a little bit at the tight end spot, certainly it was a move that made sense at the moment, and we'll see how long it lasts. They said they're going to keep the door open for quarterback, so we'll see. He's still a quarterback on the roster for what it's worth. That doesn't mean much because he's practicing at tight end, but time will tell if they switch that or not. Let's talk about a receiver, T. Frank, that you have on your list, Karam Brookins. So Brookins was, according to Matt Campbell, away from the team for personal reasons. We don't know what those are, and we're not going to get into the why of that, but that sounds more mysterious than it needs to be. We just don't know what they are. Frankly, their personal reasons are undisclosed.
Personal off-field thing.
Yeah. Right. But so at any rate, he's been away from the team during a good chunk of camp, and that has allowed some other guys to, he was supposed to be in a battle with a guy like Zay Robinson. I got it right this time, T. Frank. I did not call him Zay Flowers, so that was progress. Kobe Howard was going to be in that conversation. Amarian Jackson was going to be in that conversation. And I was actually, when I saw Brookins out on the field for the first time during camp, definitely caught my eye. You knew he was back. He's a pretty good-looking receiver, but, it's hard to make up for lost reps. So I'll be curious to see if he can do that. But at this point, he is in this category because the other guys have been able to move up by the virtue of being out there on the field.
These are camp battle situations as well, too. Dom Ruley, Brock Riker. If one guy's ascending, you can't. Other than running back, where both of the guys in the running back competition are on a stock up report, there is this duality of what's going on. So Karan Brookins missing the first half of camp, and Keith Jones looking good in flashes. You mentioned those other receivers. To me, really it was a battle between Keith Jones and Brookins in terms of who's going to be the replacement for Chase Sowell when he comes off the field, to give him a breather in some of those big-bodied physical possession and then downfield roles. Brookins has a lot of talent, but he needs reps. That's something, the feedback I've gotten about him is he's a guy that needs everything to click for him and for all of the things to make sense. And that was the missed opportunity, unfortunate for him, but now we saw the last practice we saw, it was 7-on-7, and he's still working back where he's not in that 7-on-7.
Right.
Not even with the second team. I didn't see him out there. So Marion Jackson, all those other guys that are getting reps as well, they're just getting more opportunity to show the staff what they can do. And Brookins is now behind the 8 ball. So he can be stocked up over the next 2 weeks or so. He can work back in, but that's where things stand right now. The last one that I want to go to is the cornerback room minus Adavian Collins for the exact same reason. So Darius Dixon, Jameer Joseph have been out, and it's exposed an issue that depth at that position is not strong, and they're trying to find the right guys for that outside cornerback position, but nobody's really separated themselves. So when you're looking at weaknesses on the roster, positions that might be an issue if you get some bumps and bruises during the season, they need to figure out what they're going to do at that outside cornerback position. I thought it was better during what we saw the 7-on-7 with some of those younger guys. There were a couple of the younger guys on the first and second team because a lot of these, Darius Dixon was back, but not participating in kind of the contact or semi-contact with the 7-on-7 drills. So I think that's an area for Penn State that they're working on, is that cornerback room of making sure they find a fourth guy so there is depth that they don't have to steal from other positions for.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about the cornerback depth, I was interested you had that on this list because I don't want to say it's a position that was out of sight, out of mind during the spring, but I think it was, of all the question marks we had, I think we probably had fewer about the cornerbacks just because of what Terry Smith brought back and was able to retain at Penn State. But yeah, you make a good point. If you just pull up the roster at some point and filter it by position and just look at the cornerback room, it is not hard to fathom how it could quickly become a depth question mark, even though I think they have enough flexibility in that it's in the secondary overall to be able to make some things work should they have to. And you're just, of course, preferring you just don't have to. But looking at things through this point of camp, it's something to keep in the back of your mind, without a doubt.
Yeah, I wrote about this before the final open practice, so I think it got a little bit missed in kind of the conversation. But I went into what are the options and what are the preferences, and it is not preferable to go and take some of the talented players that they want to keep on the inside of the defense. So go check that out. Once again, subscribe right now for 75% off, $30 for our full year of access for new subscribers. If you're watching the YouTube channel, we got a ton of new people watching. So like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that QR code plus the link in the description will take you to Blue White Illustrated, where you can get that great deal, get all of our content, because I know that we talk 3 hours a week. We don't even scratch the surface on the things that we know and we can discuss, and that cornerback situation is a perfect example of the in-depth detail I went into of where the positions are that need help and where you are going to want to play versatile players like Josiah Zayas and Zion Tracy, and where you don't want to play them. And those are some of the things that I think are playing into everyone going, well, just move Zion Tracy. It's super easy. And there's more to it than that. A couple guys that I saw out there, Tyler Armstead and Christian Askew, were both with the first and second team during Monday's practice. I thought they played pretty well. Admittedly, there were a lot of receivers that were not out there. It was not a full strength scrimmage on either side, but in the situation, I thought both the defense dominated in that 7-on-7. So it's not entirely it's not a disaster situation, but it is not where I think they want it to be.
No, I completely agree. And I think that, again, the context of that practice, of course, was that it was coming off a very physical, hot 90-plus play Saturday scrimmage. And so that is the context we had to watch Monday's practice through, which, I think if we had a chance to see practice later in the week, it might look a little bit more back up to speed compared to what it was. But speaking of things going on later in the week, T. Frank, let's get to today's last segment, or maybe it's the penultimate segment if we get into some mailbag questions. We have a couple starred for you guys here on this Wednesday morning. So let's get into what's left to learn. So Penn State, as we've mentioned, 17 days until the opener with Marshall, and Penn State, of course, is getting ready to switch over from full-on preseason camp, full-on Penn State focus. If you didn't think they were focusing on themselves, I don't know if you saw their social media video yesterday, T. Frank, but I think the exact caption was focusing on ourselves. So they're still at that part of camp, but they're getting ready to eventually cycle out of that. But I thought the number one on your list was perfect, so I want to start there. And in terms of things we want to learn is what exactly will the role be for Caleb Bacon, one of the 3 Iowa State linebackers who transferred in, came out of the 3-3-5 John Heacock Iowa State defense. Heacock was at practice, by the way, on Monday. He was chatting up Danton Lynn and some others.
Yeah.
the former and longtime defensive coordinator for Matt Campbell. But Bacon is a really interesting player, T. Frank, because when you look at defensive end, when you look at linebacker, I think depending on the day you're watching it, you could see a role for him at either spot. And, in terms of Lynn talking about not wanting guys to be jack of all trades, but master of nothing. I think that's probably a little bit of a push and pull with Bacon right now in terms of what they want to have him focus on during practice. But yeah, interesting guy without question.
You don't scheme against your own team. And so you're not going to do a lot of the things that you'll want to do later in camp to defeat the offense. And some of that versatility might come from Caleb Bacon playing two different positions. But here's what we know. In the spring, he played linebacker. And he has not played linebacker since then in front of us. And so they mentioned like moving him during the summer. So the open question here is, are they just giving him as many reps as possible at defensive end so he becomes a true two-way player? Can play linebacker, can play D-end, and will be on the field. Because I almost put him on my stock down. Because he's not going to be the starting defensive end, right? And he's not one of the starting linebackers. But there is this world in which he's one of the best 11 and just he's there depending on the game in a different situation. And they have been intentionally not showing us some of their things, and we'll get to this in a second, where that might show up. And so that's a big question for me in the micro when it comes to the macro of the defense of what the hell is the plan for Caleb Bacon? Like, what are you doing? I want to know all the answers. Give me the answers to the test right now so that when it happens on the field, I'm not like, my eyeballs aren't freaking out because I'm like, okay, where's 10? Because I don't want to be like the offense being like, where the hell is 10? Where's 13? How do I know where these players are lining up? Because that's what it's supposed to do, right? It's supposed to cause you to be uncertain. I would love to know so that I can then go into what the plays are very quickly and diagnose it for people on the YouTube channel, for people at bluewhiteillustrated.com, blah, blah, blah. But Caleb Bacon, is he a defensive end? Is he a linebacker? Is he both? I am just like a slave to recency bias, Greg. I try not to be. My whole career has been trying to be like, hey, don't use emotion to watch football because then you'll understand the game better. But yet I use this recency bias all the time because I'm like, yeah, he's a defensive end now. He's obviously a defensive end. He's only been playing defensive end and they play a 4-2-5. So I don't know. This is also a reset for me, Greg, of like, hey, don't be dumb. You know they want diversity. You're going to see him at linebacker, but when and how? And I don't know.
Don't forget, folks, if you hit the like button on the video, we appreciate that. The subscribe button and that little notification bell. That way, after T. Frank goes live for the Penn State Marshall game at some point, probably roughly around 7:30, 8 o'clock on September 5th, and you will get his Caleb Bacon hot takes, among many others.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you will be interested to find out, T. Frank, where he's at on that opening night and then where he ends up being as Penn State gets into some other offenses that it will face moving forward. So, thing left to learn, and I look at Tony Rojas's camp so far, and I think we have seen him do enough and feel good enough about what he's done in the past at Penn State that you can say that he has the makings of a game wrecker and has the chance to be a game wrecker for this Lynn defense in 2026. At this point in camp, I'm still not sure who the other guys are going to be in that department, and maybe you only need one. I think you need more than one eraser. And I think that when you look at this defense, there's a lot of potential at defensive end, at defensive tackle, in the secondary. But at times I just am not sure who, and they've looked good against the offense without question from what we've seen. Saturday scrimmage, pretty back and forth. But I just think at this moment in time, I still have questions about and Alan made the point previously that some guys are gamers and you're just not going to see it until they get into a game. And that's true at times in camp when you just don't, you're not going to intentionally run your teammate over or things of that nature. So, I'm just interested to see as we get into the final days of camp here, just who some of the guys that are making turnovers, the guys that are making splash plays. And we know that Josiah Zayas is a guy that has done that throughout camp here. So what role does he have in this defense? But other than that, I am just very interested to see, all told, as we get into the final days of camp, who are the staff's game wreckers on defense, who they feel good about and where they need to grow.
Yeah. I'm going to go to what kind of coverage is Danton Lynn going to run? And we're going to get to this if we do get to a mailbag here about some of the questions in the chat and some of the comments in the chat. Dantlin has run just about anything in the secondary. So, like, you have a question of is this a coach that likes single high defense in terms of one deep safety playing a lot of man coverage, a lot of cover three. Your talents and personality in the backfield is determined by what those guys can do. Dantlin doesn't have a system that relies on specific types of coverage. We've seen him play 2 high, we've seen him play 1 high, depending on the talent that he has. So I don't have a good idea of what his preferences are back there. And I don't have a good feeling for what the strengths of this unit are. So is this a man coverage team? We haven't seen a ton of man coverage in practice. Like I don't know that if there's certain things, again, they're not practicing in front of us, right? They're not going to be practicing their blitz packages because they want their offense to also be able to function. You know, like there's a little bit of like playing it even when you're in camp so that everyone gets something out of it. I also don't know that 2 high safeties with these safeties they have is a good idea, but I don't know what the composite strengths of Marcus Neal, Jeremiah Cooper when he gets back, Zion Tracy, Josiah Zayas, and then the corners all meet out to. Like, what does that actually turn into? I have some ideas of how they're going to use those players, and I like how they're going to use those players. I think it's very creative, but I don't know what the actual coverages and what they want to major in, because you have to pick something. You know, we saw what happens when you don't pick something, Greg. When you are Jim Knowles and you want to run everything, we saw what happens when you don't major in something, you minor in everything, and that's not good. And so I think that's one thing I have yet to learn about this defense is what the hell are they running in the secondary? Because I keep saying a lot about this defense is like, what the hell are they going to do? Again, that's the point.
Right. I want to get to one that's on your list here because as soon as I saw it this morning, I was curious at what you were getting at. I think I know what you were getting at, but you have on your list here, how much will the offense of Penn State play into positionless football? And I'm curious what your thought is on this one.
So we have seen, and I don't think it's any secret because they've done this in the past with different football players. We've seen Kobe Howard motion into the backfield. We've seen Quentin Martin lined up out wide. I just put out some highlights on my social media. By the way, you can follow me at Thomas Ryan Carr on social media, where I put out a lot of the highlights here that we see in practice. They want their running backs to be receivers. They want them heavily involved in the passing game. So, like, does Quentin Martin, is he a slash? Is he truly that two-way player everyone wants him to be? Is Kobe Howard going to get a lot of carries out of the backfield? Or is this just a flavor in the offense? Because positionless football, I'll use an example everybody knows. Deebo Samuel is a nightmare when he's healthy. You know, he was a nightmare for the 49ers because how do you handle him? How do you handle an actual receiver lining up in the backfield and running routes, but also being able to run the football? It changes the personnel you put on the field. We talk a lot about them wanting to put big guys on the field so that the defense counters with big guys and then they attack, right, in the passing game. The opposite is true. If you run a nickel and you force them to put an extra body on the field, but you're a superior blocking team, and now you've got a corner that's in the A gap because that's where his matchup is, suddenly you've created an advantage in a different way for the offense. And that's a versatility piece that I don't know specifically how they're going to handle some of those slash players of Zay Robinson, James Peoples. We've seen him do a lot of this stuff. So it's not just one or two players. It feels like it's baked into the offense, but also how much are they practicing because they want to practice it and they got the base offense down. So everything is a keyhole into practice, even if it's a wider one than we normally get. We don't get the full picture and the plan there. So that's the offensive side, what I don't know about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I think that when you look at how this Penn State offense has been performing when we've been there, Taylor Mauser's creative, and Penn State fans are going to see that in action this fall. There's no doubt about it. And we'll see how much of what you just talked about, T. Frank, ends up being the kind of creativity we see on the field. Another one for me, just a very simple one, and should be one that anyone could get to, but just how healthy does Penn State come out of camp? You know, we've seen some guys in and out of practices. We were told by Matt Campbell a week ago tomorrow, that was last Thursday, is a simpler way to say that they feel like they have some guys banged up, as you would expect during this point of camp, but nobody dealing with anything long-term. Does that end up being the actual way they come out of camp? No indication at this point that won't be the way they come out of camp, T. Frank, but certainly something on my list to figure out as we get into the final days as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's going to be a lot of what determines a lot of these things because you're not going to run stuff if you don't have the players to run it, for sure.
That's right. Any final ones you have here for this segment? We'll get into the mailbag and close out today's show.
Let's do that.
All right, let's get into some questions from the chat here on the YouTube channel. And we appreciate you, the guys and girls that watch the show on repeat or watching on podcast. Don't forget, you can always leave the comments here. We'll get to them when we can. but we're always accessible if you don't get us live here over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. All right, T. Frank, the first one on our list, and I think I understand the point of the question here, but we'll work through it together. Neil M2T asks, good point about not having the big guns for the reps, or can they really catch up considering the limits on practice time, or is that going to have them behind going into the season? Think we're talking about the veteran rest guys here, or yeah.
This came through when we were talking about the quarterbacks. And so Alex like Connor Berry taking half of the spring reps and some of those young guys. And Neil, yes, they have made up that ground. So first off, Rocco Beck came back for the second half of spring ball. And even if he wasn't able to do everything, he was able to do a lot. Like we were able to see a lot of practice in the spring as well. And he's out there doing what he needs to do, which is getting everyone comfortable with him controlling the offense, getting Cooper Cousins used to hearing his voice so that he doesn't false start. Getting the receivers used to throwing and catching the ball from him, including some of his, they were not as active, but Chase Soule and Brett Eskildson also came back and ran some individual periods during that time. So some of those chemistry things, they were beginning to work on that with Kobe Howard, with Andrew Rapplier. Well, actually, no, Rapplier wasn't out there. So, yes, during the summer, they were able to get some of those reps back, and fall camp, I haven't seen any chemistry issues necessarily that are huge red flag. So yes, they were able to get back, I think, on track because of those guys coming back at opportune times and ahead of schedule in a lot of situations.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think that they were also able to be intentional this summer about what those guys did miss. And now in terms of Manske, it was everything. So they were intentional about what they needed him to be ready to do during camp in the summer. So he was geared up and ready to go for that. Bradley says that and he's talking to me, said the 5-year rule, and then we're talking, of course, the 5 seasons to play 5 years. It isn't an issue for football this year, but you also said we have a few 7th and 8th year guys. How does that work? Yeah, it does get confusing, and I think that one of those ones, T. Frank, we'll just have to periodically remind people about, but it does not apply to past players at any level of college athletics. It is all moving forward. Starting with this school year, you have 5 seasons to play, or 5 years rather, to play 5 seasons. So these guys that were already in their 7th or 8th year, that does not apply to them. They are still going under the old system, which again, to the point that some have made here and elsewhere of getting rid of redshirt freshman, redshirt senior, it's just not, you could do it, but until the schools decide to do it, it's hard for us to do it. So, but anyway, the rules that are in place starting this year do not apply to the guys like the defensive tackles who transferred in that have been here a while. So that's why that is the case.
They also, like Tapaki, had lost 2 years to a knee injury and also had a COVID year. So that's how you get that particular situation. And so, as Greg said, there's some retroactive stuff there as well.
They're few and far between, but what if they had him and Smith Vilbert? They'd have the oldest defensive line in the history of college football as Smith Vilbert prepares for another college. And then Zariah Fisher, if he was still here as well, it would be a really veteran defensive line. Let's get the last 2 here. I think you answered this one, T. Frankly, and this was something regarding the secondaries. Bearded Broker said, we'll just take Zion Tracy and push him over there. That was during the secondary conversation, and I know you had said at that point that it's not as easier said than done, essentially, and I just your other thoughts on this besides that.
They don't want to. Yeah. They don't want to put him there. This has been kind of the thing that this is what I've been trying to say, and I feel like I asked Fitz yesterday of how do I communicate this? Because there is this kind of shrug / dismissal of the information. And I'm trying to provide you the lay of the land about what's going on, and everyone just kind of dismisses the conversation. I understand we're talking about cornerback depth when guys are out. But the idea that Zion Tracy just moves to outside corner when he hasn't played there in 3 years and also is integral to the defensive versatility in the interior.
Yeah.
They don't want to do that. It's not the ideal. So, yes, there are break glass in case of emergency situations. Jeremiah Cooper played corner. He also played 1% man coverage snaps. So he's a guy that played nickel before, and they have put at safety. And he's also not fully available yet. I don't want to get into too much of it because I do want you to read the article. There There are considerations about the safety position, the nickel position, and the corner position that are not just, well, just do this. There are problems and there are realities about playing outside corner that are different than playing nickel, especially in modern defense. Like, I think because we all play Madden and your third best corner plays nickel, we all think corner equals nickel, and that's not correct. That is not, like, Zion Tracy is not a corner on the roster. I know he's listed as a corner, but like functionally, it's so much closer to being a safety. And so there is just these layers of like football, and I want to get to this because it's kind of the point I was trying to make of like, don't use emotions when you watch football. John says here, I've applied that philosophy being a Dolphins fan. I just want to clarify what I mean. The result of the play and the result of what happens rarely is where the ball goes. Is that person at fault, or is that person the reason for the play? There's so many interconnected factors in football that if you just watch the football, you miss 90% of football. And if you just react to the highlights, you're missing the plays that are made by other people. That's really what I was trying to say, is like, if we just go off of highlights and kind of the hype reel around players, we don't actually know what's going on. So that's what I mean. It's like, I've made my career of trying to watch the whole game and see who's good and who's creating the situations for players to make plays. Not like, hey, don't enjoy football. That came off as a real scold, and that was not at all what I meant. Because I'm a psycho. The reason I talk and I'm here is because I love football. I get hyped about football. On game days, I feel like I'm about to go play. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying, like, when you're trying to assess what happened in the game, look at more than the football. That's all I was trying to say.
It's a fair point, T. Frank, and I think it's a good note to end on this week's edition of BWI Live. Any final thoughts, buddy, before we hit the road?
No, I emptied the chamber. That's all I got. I'm spent.
All right, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell so when we go live or when we have new videos, be it from Matt Campbell's news conference or otherwise, you know the latest breaking news and video headlines coming out of the Penn State universe. And of course, join us over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where it's 75% off an annual subscription right now. It won't last forever, folks. $29.99 gets you in the door for a year, and this entire fascinating season that is ahead for Matt Campbell and co. For T. Frank, Thomas Frank Carr, I'm Greg Pickle. We will talk to you next time on BWI Live.